you pull that?
He wants it on for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
So the Chicago Urban Program right now consists of 3 staff workers, myself, Sandra Van and Beth Hedges, but we really exist because of the hard work that was done by John Hopkins. Just walked into the room. So there is no way CUP would exist without the foundation that John laid for us.
And before that, Brenda Salton.
And Brenda Salton along with him. So if you want to go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we have 3 staff workers with CUP, and we're blessed to have the 3 of us on our staff team because we all bring very different gifts to the table. Sandra is incredibly talented with multi-ethnic ministries, with leading worship, and her wealth of wisdom and experience around those areas, as well as her 9 years experience on a college campus as a campus staff worker. I would invite you to talk to Sandra when she gets here. If you have any questions about how to do multi-ethnic stuff in your urban programs, she's a great resource for that. Beth is going to be presenting later on some of the administrative logistical sides of the Chicago Urban Program. We have about 250 students that come through every year for spring break. It'd be impossible to do that without having somebody like Beth helping us out. And I then kind of do everything in between. My background comes from politics, so I think a lot about structures of injustice and how the church can be the church in that, so how university students and fellowships can be integrating the gospel, renewing the campus, and doing that. So feel free to talk to any of us about those things. I decided that for our presentation it would be good to focus on, I think, probably the greatest challenge that we've faced as CUP staff, and that is, how do we integrate the Chicago Urban Program into the ministry that's happening on campus? How do we do that? How do we align what we're doing at CUP and the foundation that John built and the different things that we've kind of integrated into that, into what InterVarsity as a movement is doing. So we very intentionally aligned our vision with InterVarsity's vision. So the city and the campus is renewed, the students transformed, and world changers developed. And in that we have some sub-points under there. The first point here is as we learn from and love people in under-resourced communities in Chicago. This is where I'll talk briefly about Chicago. Chicago, I think, is I like to talk about how Chicago has 2 sides to it. There's 2 parts of Chicago. There's the part of Chicago that we love to show people. It's Magnificent Mile, the Bean, our sports, the areas where all the young adults go to party. And then there's the side of Chicago that we don't often like to see. That's the side of Chicago that's one of the most segregated cities in the country. When King came to Chicago in the 60s, he said he's never seen worse racism in his life, and that's after coming from the Deep South. And so we bring students into that. We invite students to enter into the part of Chicago that they don't like to go to, or that they're not often invited to. So I would love to talk more about that, but since we don't have too much time, we've done a lot of work then to aligning this with what is happening in our region, and then on the campuses. And so in that, we very strategically have the 3 of us placed in different parts of our region. So Sandra is on the regional leadership team to be parts of the conversations about where our region is moving as a whole. I spent a lot of time going to different divisional meetings and just being present to build relationships with staff workers. But then also, whenever I go, I usually take about 5 minutes to give a brief update about what is happening at CUP. And my goal in that time is to really convince staff workers that CUP is essential to their ministry on campus. And so to do that, if you want to go to the next slide, we've tied into the chapter building pyramid. Is this familiar to most people? Okay, good. And so the 2 big areas that I think we focus the most on in terms of tying into the chapter building pyramid are the evangelistic events. We try to make CUP, especially our spring break and our weekends, as accessible as possible to non-Christians. We encourage students to be inviting their friends. We say if you want to come back with a friend, we'll help give you a discount so that you can do that. At the end of our spring break program, we say, imagine what this would be like if you brought your best non-Christian friend with you. What kind of experience would they have? They're like, oh, that's great, I want to come back. And then leadership development and training towards the vision. As we listen to staff workers who've been through CUP before, that was one of the areas that they said they appreciated the most about CUP, is that CUP produces missional leaders. It addresses the lordship element that they can't do on campus, or in a different way than they can do on campus. Students come through our spring break program and they walk away realizing what a serious and high calling it is to be a follower of Christ. And they come back on campus that much more ready to respond to any call their staff worker gives, whether it's something multi-ethnic or justice related, or to lead a Bible study or something along those lines. Especially given that this is spring break, when they're making the invitations to their students to be leaders and to enter into leadership for the following year. We've developed a really solid partnership with their region on that. And so we really try to basically make the urban program the air that staff workers breathe for their campuses in that particular niche. Other incredible area around leadership development training has to do with multi-ethnicity. Our chapters really want to be multi-ethnic. Quite often when you have white staff workers like myself who come out of a white background, we don't know what we're doing. And so CUP has become a training ground for staff, for leaders, and such. So I'm going on to the next slide. Actually, we'll skip, if you can skip ahead to the last slide. One more, there we go. So just going on with campus integration, I wanted to share the stories about a couple of these here of how students have come through CUP and returned to campus. Erica Sutton came as a freshman. In response to what she learned in CUP, she went back to campus and decided to change her major to African American Studies and Women's Studies. She moved into the international student dorm so she could develop more multi-ethnic friendships. 2 years later, she came back with a dozen students from those experiences. And in that time, her chapter was going through a restart. So she was the key missional leader for the restart of her chapter. Within the next year, her chapter went from being majority white to majority ethnic. And so we're still blown away by how that happened, but we became then an integral part of their ministry on campus. The other one I'll talk about is the Chicago area team. Their new area director is a big fan of CUP, and as he's been trying to strategize on how to grow the area, he sees CUP as being integral into what they're doing. Very specifically, they're talking about planting new chapters. And in a very multi-ethnic context like the city of Chicago, if they're going to reach into the city schools or other commuter campuses that have much greater diversity than our typical demographic, they recognize the need that they have for a multi-ethnic training ground for their student leaders and for their staff workers. And so there's a possibility of working with CUP to then train chapter planters for those campuses and to work side by side with that process. And so an area that CUP might be going is to dedicate some time to that, and to actually even going on campuses with them to help do outreach and help plant chapters. So I figure that's probably the most useful part of our presentation of what we do, so feel free to grab us if you have any questions about any of this.
Thank you.